Walt Disney. 5 lessons that will help you make your first million. The Millionaire Mindset Day. Rain was relentless that October morning in 1923. A young man clutched a worn cardboard suitcase as he stepped off the train in Los Angeles. His entire fortune consisting of $40, a half-finished cartoon reel, and what his brother Roy called impossible dreams. Walter Elias Disney had just experienced his first major business failure. His Reprogram studio in Kansas City had gone bankrupt, leaving him with nothing but debt and disappointment. Standing on that rain-soaked platform, Walt could have never imagined that within his lifetime he would build an entertainment empire worth billions, create the most beloved cartoon character in history, and fundamentally change how the world experiences joy. But the journey from that moment of despair to becoming one of America's greatest entrepreneurs would teach him lessons that every aspiring millionaire needs to understand. If you're reading this because you want to build your first million, subscribe now, because what you're about to discover isn't just Walt Disney's story. It's a blueprint for transforming failure into fortune. Lesson 1. Your biggest failures are your greatest teachers. The cramped garage behind his uncle's house wasn't much, but it was all Walt could afford after arriving in Los Angeles. His brother Roy, recovering from tuberculosis, watched with concern as Walt set up a makeshift animation studio with borrowed equipment. Maybe you should get a real job, Roy suggested gently. This cartoon business, it's already failed once. Walt's hands paused over his drawing board. The memory of his Kansas City failure still stung. He had been so confident, so sure that Reprogram Productions would succeed. He had hired friends, rented a proper studio, even bought a movie camera on credit. But within a year, he couldn't pay his rent. He survived on canned beans and slept in the studio because he'd lost his apartment. The day the sheriff padlocked the doors, Walt had hidden in the bathroom and cried. "You're right," Walt told Roy, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest. "It did fail. And you know what I learned? I learned that I was thinking too small. I learned that quality matters more than quantity. I learned that you need to understand business, not just art. Most importantly, I learned that I can survive failure." Roy studied his younger brother's face. There was something different in Walt's eyes now, not the naive optimism of before, but a hardened determination forged in the furnace of failure. "Besides," Walt continued, a slight smile playing at his lips, "I've already failed at the bottom. The only direction left is up." That garage became the birthplace of the Disney Brothers studio. Walt applied every lesson from his Kansas City failure. Instead of hiring friends, he hired skilled professionals. Instead of taking on too many projects, he focused on quality. Instead of ignoring the business side, he made Roy his partner too. Handle finances. Think about your own failures for a moment. What lessons are hidden within them? Share your biggest failure and what it taught you in the comments below. The first major contract came from Margaret Winkler, a film distributor in New York. She wanted to distribute a series Walt had created called Palace Comedies, films that combined live action with animation. The contract was worth $1,500 per film, more money than Walt had ever seen. But he remembered his Kansas City mistake of expanding too quickly. "We grow slow, we grow steady," he told Roy. Every dollar was reinvested into better equipment and talented animators. Walt worked 18-hour days, redrawing scenes that weren't perfect, pushing his small team to create something extraordinary. Years later, when Disney was already a household name, a young animator asked Walt about his secret to success. Walt's response was simple but profound. "I failed my way to success. Every failure taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way." The difference between successful people and everyone else isn't that they don't fail. It's that they learn from their failures and try again. This principle became fundamental to Disney's culture. When Pinocchio and Fantasia initially lost money, Walt didn't panic. He analyzed what went wrong, adjusted his approach, and created Dumbo, a simpler, more economical film that became a massive success. When television threatened movie theaters, Walt didn't fight the change. He embraced it, becoming one of the first movie producers to create content for TV. The man who once ate canned beans in a bankrupt studio understood something crucial. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a stepping stone to success. Every millionaire has a graveyard of failures behind their fortune. The question isn't whether you'll fail. It's whether you'll learn from it. Lesson 2. Create value that solves. Real problems. The year was 1928, and Walt Disney was facing another crisis. His distributor had stolen the rights to his successful character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, along with most of his animation staff. On the train ride back from New York to Los Angeles, Walt sat in the dining car, sketchpad in hand, his mind racing. He needed a new character, something that couldn't be taken from him. What do people really want? He muttered to himself, remembering the fan letters about Oswald. They didn't just want entertainment. They wanted hope, joy, a friend who made them laugh during tough times. The Great Depression was looming, though no one knew it yet. People needed something to believe in. His pencil moved across the paper. A mouse, but not just any mouse. A mouse with personality, optimism, and an underdog spirit that audiences could relate to. Mickey Mouse was born not from a desire to make money, but from understanding what people truly needed, a character who embodied hope and perseverance. This is where most aspiring entrepreneurs fail. They create what they think is cool, not what solves real problems. If you want to build wealth, start by asking, what do people really need? Walt's wife, Lillian, wasn't impressed when he showed her the sketches. A mouse? People think mice are vermin. Exactly, Walt replied, his eyes bright with excitement. We'll make him the opposite of what people expect. He'll be clean, cheerful, brave. He'll be the little guy who always wins. In a world where people feel small and powerless, Mickey will show them that size doesn't determine success. The first Mickey Mouse cartoons were silent, but Walt sensed another problem that needed solving. Audiences were growing tired of silent. Films, talkies were the future, but no one had successfully synchronized sound with animation. Walt bet everything on creating Steamboat Willie, the first cartoon with synchronized sound. His team thought he was crazy. The technology was expensive and unproven. They would have to record the sound live while watching the animation, matching every beat perfectly. Walt sold his car to finance the experiment. Roy mortgaged his house. They were solving a problem the industry didn't even know it had yet. On November 18, 1928, Steamboat Willie premiered at the Colony Theater in New York. The audience's reaction was unlike anything Walt had experienced. They didn't just watch. They erupted in laughter, applauded, and demanded the theater play it again. One reviewer wrote, "This isn't just entertainment. It's pure joy captured on film." But Walt understood something deeper. Mickey Mouse wasn't successful just because of synchronized sound. He succeeded because he solved an emotional problem. During the darkest days of the Great Depression, when families were losing everything, Mickey Mouse gave them something money couldn't buy: the ability to laugh, to hope, to believe that the little guy could win. Subscribe now if you want to learn how to identify and solve the problems that will make you wealthy. Because understanding human needs is the foundation of every fortune. This principle guided every Disney innovation. When Walt noticed parents were bored at amusement parks while their children played, he didn't just build another park. He created Disneyland where families could have fun together. When he saw that nature documentaries were dry and academic, he created true life. Adventures, making nature exciting and accessible. When he realized television was keeping families at home, he brought Disney into their living rooms with the Mickey Mouse Club and Walt, Disney's wonderful world of color. A young entrepreneur once asked Walt how he decided what projects to pursue. Walt's answer revealed his business philosophy. "I don't make movies to make money. I make money to make movies." But here's the secret. When you focus on creating real value, on solving real problems, on giving people what they truly need, the money follows naturally. This is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of building wealth. Too many people chase money directly, creating products nobody wants or needs. Walt Disney became a millionaire many times over because he understood that wealth is a byproduct of value creation. Every successful Disney creation started with a simple question: what problem does this solve? Even the famous Disney attention to detail stems from this principle. Walt noticed that other amusement parks were dirty and poorly maintained, making families uncomfortable. So Disneyland became famous for its cleanliness. He noticed that employees at other parks were often rude or indifferent. So Disney cast members were trained to create magical experiences. Every decision was about solving problems. Others ignored Dot, the entrepreneur, who once couldn't afford to eat, understood a fundamental truth. Money flows to those who solve problems. The bigger the problem you solve, the more people you help, the greater your reward. Mickey Mouse didn't make Walt Disney rich. Solving people's need for joy, hope, and family entertainment did. Lesson 3. Perfect your craft through obsessive dedication. It was 2 a.m. in the Disney studios, and the animators had gone home hours ago. But a light still burned in Walt's office. He sat hunched over a stack of drawings, a magnifying glass in hand, examining every line, every shadow, every expression. His secretary, Dolores, peered in with concern. "Mr. Disney, you've been here." "Since 6 this morning. The team said the scenes were perfect." Walt looked up, his eyes red with exhaustion, but burning with intensity. "Perfect? Dolores, look at this frame." He held up a drawing of Snow White. Her hand movement from here, too. "Here, it takes 12 drawings. But watch ... He flipped through them rapidly. "See that tiny jerk in the middle? That's not how a real hand moves. It breaks the illusion." "But Mr. Disney, no one will notice one frame." "I'll notice," Walt interrupted. "And somewhere out there, a child will sense something's wrong without knowing why. We're not making cartoons, Dolores. We're creating life." This was 1936, and Walt was deep into production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the world's first full-length animated feature. Hollywood called it Disney's Folly. Studio executives, including Roy, worried that Walt's perfectionism would bankrupt them. The film's budget had ballooned from $150,000 to nearly $1.5 million, an astronomical sum that represented everything the company had and more. Here's what separates millionaires from everyone else. They don't just work hard. They perfect their craft with an obsession that others call crazy. Are you willing to be called crazy for your standards? Walt's obsession with perfection went beyond normal business sense. He hired art instructors to teach his animators human anatomy. He brought live animals into the studio so they could study real movement. For Snow White, he hired a young dancer, Marge Champion, to act out every scene so animators could capture realistic human motion. Walt were animators, not Michelangelo. One artist complained after the 10th revision of a single scene. Walt's response became legend in the studio. "That's exactly wrong. Michelangelo had it easy. He only had to paint the Sistine Chapel once. We have to paint 24 masterpieces every second." The obsession extended to every detail. Walt spent weeks perfecting the sound of Snow White's voice, auditioning, over 150 actresses. He rejected dozens of versions of the dwarf's personalities until each one was distinct and memorable. He personally acted out every character for his animators, showing them not just how they moved, but who they were inside. 1. Night. After viewing the completed scene where Snow White bites the poisoned apple, Walt ordered it completely redone. The animators were devastated. It had taken 6 months to create. But why? The lead animator asked. It's technically perfect. Exactly, Walt replied. It's technically perfect, but emotionally empty. I don't feel her fear, her trust being betrayed. We need the audience to feel their heartbreak. Do it again, but this time, animate her soul, not just her body. The pressure was immense. Roy showed Walt the financial projections. If Snow White failed, they would lose everything. Other studios released cheap cartoons weekly, making steady profits. Why couldn't Walt do the same? Because, Walt told his brother, anyone can make a living. I want to make a legacy. Quality is the only thing that lasts. Money spent on perfection is never wasted. It's invested. This is crucial for anyone building their first million. Are you creating something forgettable or unforgettable? Share in the comments what craft you're perfecting. On December 21st, 1937, Snow White premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater. Audience included Hollywood's biggest stars, Clark Gable, Carole Lombard, Judy Garland. Walt paced in the lobby, too nervous to watch. Then he heard something that changed his life. Silence. Complete, absorbed silence as adults became children again, lost in the world he'd created. When the film ended, something unprecedented happened. The audience gave a cartoon a standing ovation. Hardened studio executives were wiping away tears. Clark Gable was overheard saying, "I didn't know a drawing could make me cry." Snow White became the highest-grossing film of all time, earning $8 million during the Depression, when tickets cost 23 cents. It saved the studio and funded Walt's future dreams. But more importantly, it proved that perfectionism, that obsessive dedication to craft, wasn't foolishness. It was the foundation of extraordinary success. This lesson shaped everything Disney touched. When building Disneyland, Walt personally tested every ride, adjusted every sightline, tasted every food item. He would visit the park before opening, getting on his hands and knees to see it from a child's perspective. He famously pointed out a spot where paint was chipped on a carousel horse that guests would never see. "I might not see it," he said, "but I know it's there." Years later, a Harvard business professor asked Walt about his success formula. Walt's answer was simple: do what you do so well that they will want to see it again and bring their friends. This obsessive perfectionism wasn't about ego. It was about respect. Respect for the audience, respect for the craft, respect for the potential of what could be created. Every millionaire understands this truth. Good enough is the enemy of greatness. The market rewards excellence exponentially more than mediocrity. The animator who redrew scenes at 2 a.m. understood something profound. Mastery isn't about talent. It's about dedication. It's about caring more than seems reasonable, working harder than seems necessary, and perfecting details others ignore. Because in the space between good enough and perfect lies the difference between survival and spectacular success. Lesson 4. Build systems that scale your vision. The letter on Walt's desk was from a mother in Iowa. Her daughter had saved pennies for 2 years to visit Disneyland, only to find several rides closed for maintenance. The child had cried all the way home. Walt read it 3 times, his jaw tightening with each reading. "Get me Dick Nunes," he told his secretary. When the park operations manager arrived, Walt didn't mince words. "How did this happen?" "Mr. Disney, we followed standard amusement park procedures. Rides need maintenance." "Stop." Walt held up the letter. This isn't a standard amusement park. This little girl didn't save for 2 years to visit a standard anything. She came to visit a magic kingdom, and we failed her. This was 1957, too. Years after Disneyland opened, Walt was learning a painful lesson. Vision without systems fails at scale. He could personally ensure quality in his animations by reviewing every frame, but he couldn't personally operate every ride, train every employee, or maintain every attraction. Here's where most entrepreneurs hit their ceiling. They can create excellence personally, but can't replicate it. If you want to build real wealth, you must build systems that scale your standards. Subscribe to learn how Disney cracked this code. Walt gathered his leadership team. We need to rethink everything, not just policies, but philosophy. How do we ensure that every guest has a perfect experience, even when I'm not here? The solution became the Disney University, one of the first corporate training programs in America. But this wasn't typical employee training. Walt insisted on calling employees cast members because they weren't just workers. They were performers in a show. Janitors weren't janitors. They were custodial hosts who helped create the magic. Every person who walks through these gates is leaving their troubles behind. Walt explained to the first training class, they're not customers, they're guests in our home. Your job, whether you're operating a ride or sweeping a street, is to help create the happiest place on earth. The systems Walt developed were revolutionary. The Disney point, using 2 fingers or an open hand to give directions, because pointing with 1 finger was considered rude in some cultures. The requirement that any cast member must know the answer to any question or find someone who does. The rule that no cast member could ever say, I don't know, without adding, but let me find out for you. But systems meant nothing without the right people. Walt's hiring process was unique. Technical skills could be taught. Attitude couldn't. He looked for people who naturally smiled, who enjoyed making others happy, who took pride in details others ignored. One famous story illustrates this perfectly. Walt was walking through Disneyland when he noticed a custodial cast member drawing Mickey Mouse in water on the sidewalk for a group of children. The water would evaporate in minutes, but the children were delighted. Walt watched, then approached the man. How long have you been doing that? The custodian smiled. Since my first day, Mr. Disney. I figured if I'm going to clean, I might as well create magic while I do it. Walt promoted him on the spot to train other custodial staff. This became the Disney way, finding people who understood that every role, no matter how small, was part of creating something larger. Think about your own business or career. Are you building systems that multiply your impact, or are you still trying to do everything yourself? Share your biggest scaling challenge below. The financial impact was staggering. By creating systems that replicated his standards, Walt could expand beyond what he could personally touch. Disneyland's success led to television shows, merchandise, and eventually Walt Disney World. Each new venture followed the same systematic approach: define the experience, create the standards, build the systems, train the people. Roy, ever the financial pragmatist, marveled at the transformation. Walt, you've done something I didn't think was possible. You've made perfectionism profitable at scale. But Walt understood something deeper. It's not about perfection, Roy. It's about consistency. Guests don't expect perfection. They expect magic. And magic happens when everyone understands their role in creating it. The systems extended beyond operations. Walt created Imagineering, a systematic approach to creativity that combined imagination with engineering. He developed storyboarding, a system for visualizing entire films before animation began. He pioneered audio animatronics, creating repeatable performances that maintained quality show after show. Even Walt's famous attention to detail became systematized. A Disney look. Grooming standards for cast members. The themed lands concept, ensuring every element supported. The story. The sightline principle, making sure guests never saw anything that broke the illusion. A competitor once asked Walt how he could afford such elaborate training and systems. Walt's response revealed his business philosophy. How can I afford? Not to? Every disappointed guest tells 10 people. Every delighted guest tells 100. Systems aren't a cost. They're an investment in multiplication. This is the lesson every aspiring millionaire must learn. You can't build wealth by doing everything yourself. True success comes from creating systems that replicate your standards, multiply your efforts, and scale your vision. Walt Disney didn't build an empire by drawing every cartoon or greeting every guest. He built it by creating systems that ensured millions of people could experience his vision without him being there. The man who once worked alone in a garage understood that the path from thousands to millions wasn't through working harder. It was through building systems that worked while he slept. Because wealth isn't created by effort alone. It's created by building machines that multiply effort exponentially. Lesson 5. Persist. When everyone thinks you're crazy, the banker sat in silence, staring at Walt's elaborate presentation. Spread across the conference table were detailed drawings of what looked like an impossible dream. A 160-acre amusement park with themed lands, a fairy tale castle, a jungle cruise, a rocket to the moon. The year was 1953, and Walt Disney was trying to raise $17 million for Disneyland. Finally, the lead banker spoke. Mr. Disney, with all due respect, amusement parks are dying. Television is keeping families at home. And this, he gestured at the plans, this is not an amusement park. It's a fantasy. We must decline. This was the 5th rejection. Every major bank had said no. Even Roy, Walt's brother and business partner, had doubts. The board of directors at Disney Studios thought Walt had lost his mind. One board member had pulled Roy aside. Your brother needs help. This obsession with an amusement park is going to destroy everything you've built. That night, Walt sat in his backyard, watching his daughters on their swing set. His wife Lillian found him there, tears in his eyes. Maybe they're right, he said quietly. Maybe I am crazy. Lillian sat beside him. Do you remember what you told me when everyone said Snow White would fail? When they called it Disney's folly? Walt managed a small smile. That the only folly would be not trying. So, what's different now? This is the moment that separates dreamers from millionaires. Not the dreaming. Anyone can dream. It's the persistence when everyone, including those you trust, thinks you're making a mistake. Are you willing to bet on yourself when no one else will? Walt's response to rejection was characteristic. If banks wouldn't fund Disneyland, he'd find another way. He approached television networks with a radical proposal. He'd produce a weekly show called Disneyland to promote the park in exchange for funding. ABC, desperate for content, agreed to invest $500,000 and guarantee $4.5 million in loans. But even with ABC's backing, Walt needed more. He did something that horrified his financial advisors. He borrowed against his life insurance, sold his vacation home, and convinced Disney employees to invest their savings. He was risking everything again. The construction of Disneyland was a nightmare. The site in Anaheim was 160 acres of orange groves. They had 1 year to transform it into Walt's vision. Contractors quit, saying the timeline was impossible. Engineers said the technology Walt wanted didn't exist. The budget spiraled out of control. 6 weeks before opening, a labor strike shut down construction. With opening day advertised nationally, postponement would be catastrophic. Walt personally negotiated with union leaders, working 20-hour days to keep the project moving. He slept in a trailer on the construction site, personally overseeing every detail. "You're killing yourself," Roy warned, watching his brother survive on coffee and determination. "Better to die trying than live regretting," Walt replied. 3. Days before opening, nothing was ready. The asphalt on Main Street was still wet. Plumbers said they could only provide water for either toilets or drinking fountains, not both. Half the rides weren't tested. The company was hemorrhaging money. Subscribe now if you want to discover how the world's greatest entrepreneurs push through their darkest moments. Because success isn't about avoiding crisis, it's about persisting through. It's July 17th, 1955. Opening day. Everything that could go wrong did. The temperature hit 101 degrees. The fresh asphalt trapped women's high heels. A gas leak forced Fantasyland to close. Rides broke down. The crowd of 28,000, twice the expected number due to counterfeit tickets, overwhelmed the facilities. Restaurants ran out of food. Drinking fountains didn't work. The press was brutal. Disney's folly. Headlines returned. One reporter called it Black Sunday. Critics said Walt had finally overreached, that his ego had destroyed his empire. That night, Walt stood on Main Street, watching maintenance crews work frantically. An employee found him there at 3 a.m., still in his opening day suit, tears streaming down his face. "I failed them," Walt said. "All those children. I failed them." The employee, a young ride operator named John, shook his head. "Mr. Disney, I watched those kids today. Yes, things went wrong. But I saw their faces when they met Mickey Mouse. I saw their wonder at the castle. You didn't fail them. You gave them something they'd never seen before." Walt looked at the young man. "Do you really believe that? My daughter hasn't stopped talking about it. She wants to come back tomorrow." That moment crystallized something for Walt. Perfection wasn't. The goal, persistence was. Every dream faces its Black Sunday. The question is what you do on Monday. Walt threw himself into fixing every problem. Within weeks, capacity issues were solved. Rides were perfected. Staff was retrained. Most importantly, Walt did something unprecedented. He kept improving. While other amusement parks remained static, Disneyland evolved constantly. "Disneyland will never be completed," he declared. "It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." The persistence paid off spectacularly. Within 7 weeks, Disneyland welcomed its 1 millionth guest. Within a year, it had generated $10 million in revenue. The park that banks wouldn't fund became the most successful entertainment venue in history. But Walt's greatest persistence was yet to come. In 1966, diagnosed with lung cancer, doctors gave him 6 months to live. Instead of retreating, Walt accelerated. He spent his final weeks in a hospital bed, designing Walt Disney World on the ceiling tiles above him, using an 4-pole as a pointer to show Imagineers his vision. "You need to rest," doctors insisted. "I'll rest when I'm dead," Walt replied. "Right now, I have a world to build." Even on his deathbed, when executives suggested scaling back his plans for Disney World, Walt's response was characteristic. "If anything, we're thinking too small." Here's what every aspiring millionaire must understand. The moment you most want to quit is usually the moment just before breakthrough. What dream are you about to give up on? Share it in the comments. Let's encourage each other to persist. Walt. Disney died on December 15, 1966, but his persistence lived on. Walt Disney World opened 5 years later, becoming the most visited vacation destination on Earth. The man who banks rejected, who critics mocked, who faced failure after failure, built an empire worth over $200 billion today. His secret wasn't genius, it was persistence. When Snow White was called folly, he persisted. When he lost Oswald, he created Mickey. When banks rejected Disneyland, he found another way. When opening day was a disaster, he fixed it. When cancer tried to stop him, he designed from his hospital bed. Because here's what Walt Disney understood that most people don't. Success isn't about being right all the time. It's about persisting when you're wrong, learning, adjusting, and trying again. Every millionaire has a moment when everyone thinks they're crazy. The difference is they persist anyway. The boy who arrived in Los Angeles with $40 and a cardboard suitcase didn't succeed because he never failed. He succeeded because he never stopped. And that, more than any other lesson, is the true Disney. Magic. Your $1 million decision starts now as you close this story. You stand at the same crossroads Walt Disney faced countless times. You have dreams that others call impossible. You have ideas that make people shake their heads. You have ambitions that seem too big for your current circumstances. The question isn't whether you have what it takes. Walt proved that success isn't about starting advantages. It's about 5 decisions. 1. Will you learn from your failures or be defeated by them? Will you create real value or chase quick money? Will you perfect your craft or settle for good enough? Will you build systems or remain limited by your personal capacity? Will you persist when everyone thinks you're crazy? Your first million isn't about luck, connections, or even capital. It's about applying these 5 lessons with the same obsession Walt brought to animation. It's about seeing problems others ignore, creating solutions others think impossible, and persisting when others quit. The difference between dreaming and achieving is action. What's the first step you'll take today toward your $1 million vision? Share it below, and let's build our empires together. Remember Walt's words, all our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them. Your courage starts now. If this story inspired you to think differently about success, subscribe for more millionaire mindsets that will transform your approach to wealth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their impossible dream might just be their $1 million breakthrough. Because somewhere right now, another dreamer is standing at a train station with $40 and a cardboard suitcase, about to change the world. Will that dreamer be you?